Welcome to episode 138 of the Necronama.com. I am James Sabata, horror author, screenwriter, co-host of the podcast you're listening to right now. And I have no idea how to make a joke about this movie, so I'm not even going to try. You're up, Don.
And I'm Don Guillory, author, historian, educator, co-host of this podcast, and I have a very special set of skills.
You just have to compare it to an American movie. I see how it is. So, just kidding. Joining us today, Daniel Barnett is on the show. Welcome to the show, man.
Welcome.
Yeah. Thanks for having me on, you two. I've been looking forward to this chat for a while. My name is Daniel Barnett, for those of you who don't know me. I'm a horror author, got a handful of published books, and I'm currently hard at work on the Nightmareland Chronicles, an ongoing serialized adventure horror epic following one man's journey to reach his estranged daughter in a world claimed by eternal night. And that's consumed me for the last 4 years or so of my life. So,
oh, wow. Nice. Well, that's really cool.
Yeah,
and
nice obsession, right?
Those are the best kinds.
Exactly. That's the thing, man. Like when you put that much work into something, it also like usually really shows, So I'm fascinated by this. Tell me about it.
Cheers. Thanks. Yeah. So this is a story that, I was inspired by the format of, are you familiar with Hugh Howey? Or, he did wool, he did sand. I liked that serialized format, so I thought I'd wing something in something of that nature, structurally speaking, where you're telling a longer ongoing story, but each individual part is contained with a beginning, middle, and end. I mean, you can't pick up 5 before you've read 1, but each part has something of a climax and satisfying arc, or at least that's my intention. A mileage will vary for readers, I'm certain, but this is a story. I like big, fun adventures. And when I say the word fun, I guess horrifying might also fit into that into that frame there. But hey, we all have our ways of looking at things, I guess.
Absolutely.
Stories with characters worth rooting for. Lots of danger, lots of things to triumph over or otherwise, and that's my bag. That's what I'm trying to do anyway.
Very cool. No, I like that. So this is normally where I say, "Hey, why'd you pick this movie?" And I got to tell you, in this particular situation, I'm overly fascinated by this because this movie is not what I expected you to pick when we started talking. And I was like, I've heard of that. And then I checked it out and I was like, holy shit, this is intense as fuck. And I just want to know, is it because it's so dark, or was there something specific that hit you, or what made you want to go with this one?
Well, okay, so the shortest answer to that question is it's fucking awesome. It's a great movie.
Oh yeah.
I had a handful of things, I think, that I threw your way, like A Dark Song, which is another one of my favorites. I was trying to find something that is standout in its own way and maybe less known. Those movies that have stuck with me for a while. I know I had a couple on there, like potential ones, like Anything for Jackson and The Medium, which I just watched recently, was pretty cool too. But I Saw the Devil is one that I continue to revisit. I mean, first off, I'm a big fan of Eastern movies, martial art movies, things like that, like The Raid 2, those kinds of things.
Nice, yeah.
Definitely one of my, I just love them. In any case, this movie has a little bit of that, but it's like a spice. It doesn't take over the rest of the movie. It's just one of the ingredients. Mm-hmm. But I think this is, it's beautifully shot.
Oh yeah.
The opening cinematography with the snow on the road and the long shots and stuff, absolutely gorgeous. the performances are incredible, but I think it does something that no other movie has successfully done, which is, I mean, at least in this way. Obviously, there's lots of subversions out there in film in general, but like, this is a revenge movie. This is, woman is murdered, and the bereaved husband goes after the serial killer. But where this movie subverts all expectations and breaks utterly new ground is the guy finds the bastard right away, like right away in the scheme of things, and it just turns into this. I mean, it's just the escalation. The total subversion of who you think is the dangerous person in this party, the cost of revenge, but not in some cheap, trite sort of like revenge is bad kind of way. More of it's just like, what happens when the animal gets off your leash. There's nothing like it. Like this, like it's got 3 acts, but the first act covers what would be the whole movie for a different movie. And then the second act is bonkers. And then the third act is crazier still. And you walk away just like you've just been slapped and punched in the gut and all of these different things, because it's a totally surreal experience.
No, absolutely. One of the things I loved most from a writing point of view is there's no backing down ever.
No.
Neither side backs down. Neither side has that little, there's usually like the good guy has one line he won't cross, or that doesn't fucking exist. No. And the bad guy, like, no matter how down he is, like, gets his fucking Achilles ripped, and he's out there like hobbling around, and he's still like, I'm gonna find you and fuck you up. Like, I mean, just the nonstop commitment to revenge mixed with the overall view that revenge is fucking meaningless.
Yeah.
Like, wow.
It's a cat
this
and
movie
mouse.
blew me away.
It's a cat and mouse story with 2 cats. They're both just like,
That's true.
It's
You're
wild.
it. Yeah. Jesus. No, I gotta say, you said the performances were amazing. Like, these performances are what I consider truly Oscar worthy.
Oh, yes. Like, thank you.
Holy fucking hell. And I mean, obviously this would never be considered for such a thing. But I look at movies that do win it, and I'm like, I don't believe your character in the way that I believe this. No, and I've seen Old Boy, like, I've seen what I thought this actor could do before. And now I'm like, whoa, just.
Yeah, the villain in this movie his performance is just genre defining. Like, there's just nothing that comes close to it. And then you kind of have the main character playing something of a straight man that comes unraveled, like, by the end. And even his performance, which relies a lot more kind of on subtlety, because he's sort of like this stone that, like, the impactful moment for him is like when he finally shows a crack at the end,
Mm-hmm.
in a sense, like that shot when he's walking down the road and he puts the earbuds in and he just starts to totter and his eyes well up. It's like, it's so raw. It's so real. It all feels real in a way that you don't see in many movies.
What about you, Don?
Well, I was going to say, I'm glad that they got a lot of depth with this, because I made my joke, of course, at the beginning about Taken, because I watched this whole movie, and probably about 10 minutes to go, my wife made a joke about Liam Neeson. And I just sat there and I was like, fuck, that was the movie I forgot about. But even beyond that, for me, Taken is very one-dimensional. It's about a dad who's going to rescue his daughter, and he's not going to let anything get in his way. Whereas this one, it is, I'm going to torture you and make you feel the fear that these women and their families felt having to, the women felt, while you were torturing them, raping them, whatever else was involved. But then also the fear that the families had to deal with, one, in finding the bodies, or the torture and finding the bodies, the fear of when they're missing and what's happened to them, what their final moments were like. But then to let you know that you're never safe. I'm not going to end this quickly. I'm going to let you know that you are in no way, shape, or form ever going to feel safe, even up to that final moment. You know, when the monster is basically saying like, "Oh, you know, you're not going to break me. You know, I'm not going to get scared. You're not going to do any of this stuff to me." Blah 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 blah. And you realize that, I mean, this is still part of the game that's being played between. I'm going to mess up his name. Between Soo Hyun and Kyung Chul was the bad guy, and Soo Hyun is the good guy. But when Kyung Chul is like, oh well, you know, you get this sense that this is a guy who's not going to be reformed. So whatever happens to him is good. You know, no matter how badly he gets beaten up, torn apart, you know, tortured, you're hoping for something more. But then what you unfortunately start to realize is, even as a viewer, you're starting to rationalize all the shit that is being done to this bad guy, whether you agree with it. Because when we covered a movie like this before, whether it was, you know, Last House on the Left or any of the other revenge movies, it's always like, oh, you know, if this happened to me or my family or my daughter, I could see myself doing X, Y, and Z, or I would let the police handle it, or I'd find some way to resolve this. And it's always a quick way when we talk about it. It's never a thing about, I'm going to drag this on and on and on for roughly the 2 hours after that first 15 to 20 minutes, where Si Hyun is convinced, like, the remaining 2 hours of this movie, I'm going to just dismantle this guy. Like, I'm going to break him down. Yeah. Even though he has other people pleading with him who know what he's doing, and they're like, stop, it's not worth it. And you get the sense that he has a full development, or at least comes full circle as far as understanding that maybe this wasn't worth it because of all the other people that got hurt along this path, when he could have just ended this quickly. But even then, when you're looking for revenge, are you ever going to get what you want out of it?
It's interesting too. I think there's even maybe a subtext here, partially because of his profession, or even partially because of the depth of his grief and his rage, that he almost seems to understand going in the meaninglessness of everything he's doing, and he's almost prolonging the inevitable by not killing this guy he's holding on to purpose for as long as he possibly can. Mm-hmm. And because once that's done, he has to face just the reality of what he lost along the way. And of course, he ends up losing a whole lot more because of, he's got this jackal on a leash, and the jackal slips the leash at the end. And he gets him back because he's a bad man in his own right, but not before the damage is done. And there's just something to be said for, well, I mean, thematically, there's a lot of things to be said, but even just for like sheer entertainment value, just pure entertainment value. The moment he catches this guy in the first act and lets him go, you have no idea what's to come next. And it's one of the purest, rawest, strangest movie-going experiences that I can recall because of that. Because it's like, wait, you had him. Shouldn't you have just, Yeah,
because my wife even asked that question. She was like, why is he letting him go? Because she watched it with me when I was watching it for the show. And it didn't click for me. I just figured, like, okay, well, he's trying to find out if anybody else was involved. So there are no more questions of like, oh, was it just this one guy? Yeah. Because even when he was going through this list of suspects, there were 4 people who have been accused of similar crimes before. Mm-hmm. So I immediately thought, okay, well, this guy, he's trying to think about this a couple of steps ahead. Like, if I kill him, does this mean that this is the only guy that's involved? I mean, when you watch the movie, you realize he is the only guy that's involved, but Sun Hyun doesn't know that.
Yeah.
But then again, you start to think, well, maybe he didn't know that he was the only guy. And it's like, you know what? I don't care if there's 1 or 20 of you. Like, I'm just going to take you to your wit's end.
Yeah, he's kind of in a very in a in a very perverse sense. He's essentially determined to just make the rest of this guy's life like one really like monstrous case of unfulfillment.
Mm-hmm.
He's never going to let this guy get his rocks off again. He's going to let him think he's going to get his rocks off again, and he's going to march into the room, beat the shit out of him, give him concussion, rip his like Achilles tendon out of his ankle, and then ditch him in a parking lot or whatever. It's just.
Isn't that worse though? Like, he doesn't care that these women are in this position. Like, he never makes it in time to save them before it starts or prevent any of this. I don't know. That bothered me.
Oh, it's certainly where like that really. I mean, I'm not even saying it's really morally gray. It's pretty clearly wrong. He doesn't.
Yeah.
He doesn't let them get. He doesn't let this guy take it all the way.
Mm-hmm.
But he allows like these victims or potential victims who cross this monster's path to get a life's worth of trauma nevertheless in the pursuit of whatever obscure thing he's pursuing for himself. And it's not entirely clear sometimes whether that's because by intention. Like, did he wait to come in until like things were almost there because he wanted the guy to get excited, and then
maybe it's a way to keep it from being a crime. Like, oh, well, a crime was happening. I had to stop it.
Yeah.
See? Now he's not just attacking people who are masturbating and he destroys their nuts with a fucking wrench or whatever that was.
The whole broke your balls. Like, oh, who's the guy who broke his balls?
Yeah, you just don't see that in American cinema. not in that capacity.
I guess I just didn't understand. Why doesn't he just do that to his main antagonist? Like, you could keep people from being raped if you did that, and you could still follow him around and ruin his life.
Yeah. I think I think he wanted the guy to think he had a chance and then continue to show him that he didn't. Like, because he just like, I own you. And like, there's nothing that you can, you're the mouse now. You'll feel exactly what they felt. But
the people I have a bigger problem with, though, is whoever let this guy be a bus driver. Because if he's one of the 4 suspects, all 4 suspects have been accused of similar crimes in the past. Mm-hmm. Why the fuck are you trusting him as the bus driver for these girls?
It's been a little while since I've seen it. Was he actually employed as the bus driver, or did he assume that?
So I took it as he must have been, because like the school calls him.
Right.
And
that's true.
So, and like none of the girls are like creeped out that he's not their normal driver or anything like that. So he had to have been. Yeah. So I blame them even more.
Plus, he makes that comment, when he doesn't respond to them calling, he's like, well, I guess I lost my job. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So it seems as though this is his regular gig, and maybe he was going by a different name. I'm sure this isn't uncommon to where somebody who has committed a crime like that assumes a false identity in order to have employment, but then also to have access like he does. Because I remember at least some conversations that have taken place with police or people within law enforcement, and stating that the car that's going to make you the most invisible, as far as the least likely to be seen as a suspect, is a minivan. Because they're not looking at the minivan thinking like, oh, there's some creep in there, there's some drug dealer, there's something nefarious going on. It's like, it's a fucking minivan. Like, who does shit, that you can really connect to? Because you're not looking for that. And the same thing with the remake of The Hitcher. I can't remember if this was a line from the original, but I remember distinctly from the remake that Sean Bean's character, the Hitcher or the hitchhiker, makes his comment, and he says, "Oh, the thing, I wear a wedding ring because people trust married men, or at least to pick you up off the side of the road. They figure that you're secure, somebody trusts you. They see that wedding ring, and they assume that this person is not going to be a problem or a threat." And in all honesty, I mean, this guy, when he picks up the young lady at the beginning, of course, picks up another one before he beats her with a lead pipe. It's that same thing. He's not threatening. That van disarms whoever is around it to where you think like, well, shit, this is a school bus. This is a little school van. Like, what the hell is he going to do?
Wasn't he driving wasn't he a taxi driver or something at the beginning? Or was it
I think he stole the taxi later.
Okay.
But when he starts off, he's just got that little bus, it's a van, but I mean, it's a little bus that he uses. And, that's not something that you would look at and say, well, this guy's going to be a problem. Because of the vehicle, the job that's associated with the responsibility that's associated with it, as opposed to, some random person who happens to be driving through and picks you up.
Yeah. Oh, I see where I just reread the synopsis. He's characterized as a taxi driver on a dark road, taxi driver.
Oh yeah.
That's where I was like, wait a second.
I thought maybe it was later when he gets in the taxi with the other two guys and then, beats the living shit out of them.
It's like they were competing over the murder. That was what got me.
Well, and Don, I don't know if you noticed, but the one guy in the taxi was the fourth suspect from the beginning.
Was
yeah. I did not notice that.
I did not notice that either.
I loved that. I was like, that's fantastic.
And it's just, it is just, I mean, one downward spiral into hell, basically, especially from, can we talk about the Cannibal House a little?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, please.
Yes. Right? I mean,
this could have been its own movie. I loved it so much. I was just like, holy crap.
I don't think I've seen something that is, well, it really fits in this movie, but I don't think I've seen something that's kind of like its own, such a distinct hellish set piece in an already hellish, like 2 hour and 20-minute runtime since like, what was that movie with Paul Walker? Running Scared.
Oh, okay.
Kind of vibes of that. So this is like part in Running Scared where like one of the kids gets kidnapped by like just like,
wasn't it Russian gangsters or something?
It was a dad and a mom who were like pedophile serial killers of children. And like it's this really weird, bizarre, just like part of this movie that's all about a whole bunch of like, it's about the mob, it's about all of these other things. And in the middle of this movie, there's just like, or near the end of this movie or whatever, there's just this absolutely like horrifying series of events where it's so tonally, not, I mean, jarring kind of, but like it fits, but it's so unexpected, you know what I mean? Like this was kind of in that same ballpark where it feels like its own thing, but it also kind of belongs in the movie as well at the same time. It's just,
it almost seems like the most normal thing out of the movie.
Yeah, exactly.
And I don't know, that sounds weird to talk about cannibalism that way, but it's at least the way the cannibal treats it and the way his girlfriend treats it is kind of like, hey, we're having a friend over for dinner. No, no pun intended, but we're having a friend over for dinner. And, he's disgusted at the fact that this guy is eating human meat. But mind you, this guy is a mass murder, a serial killer, a serial rapist. Like, where does he have the vantage point to actually make a judgment call on somebody else's morals? But yeah, it's just this weird moment where they're, communicating as just horrific people.
Okay.
But yeah, you're right. That could have easily been its own movie.
You get this like little like community of monsters. And like functionally within the plot itself, it sort of creates this situation where you're like, okay, it creates an actual new obstacle for our hero to like overcome. So it creates a new tension because now it's not just this guy, it's this guy and the woman and a setting that's kind of being explored and uncovered as it goes along. And it's this movie really is just kind of like, it's, what's the word I'm looking for? It's like an appetizer plate, but not like, but every part of it's sort of a full meal. You know, you just have a little bit of everything, every kind of horror scattered throughout this movie.
The one thing I would have really liked to see in the Cannibal House, when our good guy finds this woman chained up, I wanted it to hit him really fucking hard, to like literally see it.
Mm-hmm.
And I was hoping that would be like a distraction moment, like he'd get stuck there and that's how they'd get the upper hand for a minute. And they didn't do that, and that's fine. It's still a great scene, and I mean, this movie is just fucking great no matter what anyway. But I was just really expecting them to go there, and they didn't. And I kind of felt like he should have been hit harder by that.
Yeah, I can definitely, I can see where you're coming from there. I mean, I think that, and that would be a very, it would have been a plot line, like where he finally, he finds his limit at that point to an extent, if that moment occurs. It's interesting because in some sense of the word, it's almost like our protagonist isn't really there for this entire movie. This is like an out-of-body experience for him this entire time, because he's just operating on a different plane of anger and rage and sadness. So I think the only times we actually see him as a human in this movie, like, is at the beginning on the phone, and then at the very end when he finally like lets it in. The rest of the time is he sort of just holding his breath and gritting his teeth through all of this. And like I almost feel like he's not even allowing himself to see or think at all.
Or grieve for that for that matter, because there's a glimpse of him grieving his fiance.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's that moment toward the end where, the killer, reveals like, oh, by the way, she was pregnant. You didn't know, that still moment where he's done, but he still feels this need, like, I've got to hurt you even more because I might not have this chance. Which again, it's remarkable the way that he is able to, or at least the character is able to hold on the way he does, as you pointed out, in spite of all these moments that should have broken him down some more. Yeah. But maybe disassociating himself or divorcing himself from those feelings and from that, what's going on, is what kept him level-headed enough to where he could do what he needed to do to this guy and anyone who got in his way. Yeah.
I kind of touched on this like a little bit earlier, but I think there is a reading of this movie where you could literally just take it as simple as like, this man is doing terrible things in order to postpone his grief. Like, right. Like, he knows he's going to have to grieve sooner or later, but until this other guy is dead, he doesn't have to. He's not ready to yet. So he doesn't kill this guy, because that just means he has to begin the grieving process. So what does he do is he drags this man's destruction out as long as humanly possible. And he says it's so that this other guy can feel what these women felt. And I'm sure there's an element of truth in that, but I think underneath all of that too is just like, this guy's like white knuckled, hanging on to anything to keep him from himself from falling in that pit where there's just sadness and no action can cure anything. And it's just the loss that you have to grapple with, like intangible, nothing that a man of action can fix, because that's what waits for him at the end of it all. And he kind of seems to know that in a weird way, it's compelling,
I think that really adds a level to it as well. The knowing that you're doing all of this for nothing, but having no idea what else to do. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And like, I think it was Don said earlier, like, most of us, when we think, if I was in this situation, I'd go kill that bastard, right? Like, we don't think dragging it out and that. But when you started talking about how that gives him a purpose, like, I was just sitting here and I was literally playing the tape forward in my head, trying to figure out, like, what do you do when that's done? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Like, there's just nothing. Like, there's literally nothing. And then the worst part for this guy is, you know what he does when it's done? He goes back to being a cop probably and deals with this shit every fucking day.
Yeah.
Like, if he got away with all of this, if no one knew that he did it, and honestly, they don't seem to give a fuck, but like, yeah. In a normal world where he gets away with this, he just goes back to dealing with it daily.
Yeah.
Like, holy shit. I'm surprised he didn't kill himself at the end.
No kidding. And I think that's what's kind of interesting about his character is they really sort of implicitly wrap his profession into what he does, and not in a way where it's just like to justify how badass he is, but in a way where there's truly a sense that like none of this is entirely like, what's the word I'm looking for? Like, he really just understands how endless all of this violence is from the beginning, but it's his bag. Like, that's what he does.
Well, and it's his whole identity.
Yeah.
Like, his whole identity was this woman and his job. Like, that's all we ever see of him. And once she's out of the picture, all he has is revenge. It's deep shit, man, but it's very real. There are a lot of people that wouldn't know what to do after this. And I don't think they'd go to this level, but I mean, you see revenge all the time. You see fathers whose daughters are molested or whatever, and they seek revenge, and good for them. I understand. But like, at some point you have to live with whatever you did.
Right.
Yeah. And I think it's not that other movies don't have characters that are acting in revenge and seem to have some sense of the meaninglessness of the brutality or whatever, but it's the structure of this movie that allows like the exploration of that idea, and not just like other movies kind of have like some sort of trite monologue where like a side character will say the thing that the main character isn't saying to some extent, talk about what we're saying right now, but they find a way to like inject it into the screenplay, because once the cathartic moment is over, the movie is typically over too, essentially. This movie really takes it and just like holds it in its hands and like kind of, functionally like lets it go so it can grab on again, lets it go so it can grab on again. And just, it's so strikingly subversive from what you'd expect going in to something like this. There's
definitely something about this film that feels very different than every other revenge story. And part of it for me is we usually see a light at the end of the tunnel. Like, maybe not a big light, but we have something. And this one hits so realistically for me. I know I'm just drilling this point in that there's nothing else, but he's literally left with nothing at the end. He's just walking. Like, we don't even know where he's going.
No, yeah. He's listening to this family scream on the headphones as he's walking down a rainy road, and when he hears that final thing, he just finally starts to totter and break, and like cue credits. It's just, there's no emotional resolution. It's just escalation, roll credits. And there's something so...
Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
I'm just rambling, but there's just something kind of like so terribly darkly pure about the way this movie just like. I think it was you, James. You said nobody in this movie backs down throughout the whole thing, but the movie itself like functionally doesn't back down at all or look away once. It just climbs and climbs. There's no falling action. There's nothing. It's just starts at 10 and ramps up to like 20 out of 10, and then like, here's the credits. Have fun. Go on with your lives.
And I already mentioned the guy who gets his dick bashed in, but like, I like how this sets up that exact thing's going to happen, that no one's going to back down. And like, this is where he's starting.
Yeah.
Like, like, holy shit, what? Because when we reach the end and we reach this amazing beheading scene, like, it doesn't feel weird. Like, we're not like, why did he suddenly go Jigsaw on this? No, it works.
It's like
we get to the point where we just accept, yeah, of course he would do this.
Yeah. What else does he have? He has to one up the guy in some way. They like that's the whole thing they've been doing, and the literal only thing left is to just ruin this guy's family. That's it. That's the way he finally ruins it. He's like, "Well, I'm gonna make your son see it," and that's
which I think is weird because this family feels like they already are pretty traumatized by this guy, and I don't know. It's
yeah, but even
weird.
then, that's not something that they would welcome or want to see.
Of course not. Yeah.
Being estranged from a family member. Because I have, and I'm sure we all do, but I have family members that I couldn't care to see for the rest of my life. But if I saw something bad like this happen to them, I'd be like, well, fuck. I didn't like this person, but I didn't want this to happen to him. Yeah. So I think that was probably the fear that this guy had was, he knew he fucked up as a son. He knew he fucked up as a father. And that was part of the reason why, he gave himself a little bit of separation from them. But definitely why he wouldn't want to put them into that situation where they saw any of that.
Their estrangement had kind of insulated them probably from just how much of a monster he was. Like they may have had some vague inkling that he was operating on the fringe of what was socially acceptable and had done some bad things and was a disappointment, but the depth of his monstrosity was probably never remotely close to plumbed by them. They probably had no idea just how awful he was. And then they got to say goodbye to him in the way they got to say goodbye to him, which was almost like making them complicit. Well, literally not almost, making them complicit in his death too. Mm-hmm. So like it's just bananas, man. The movie is just bonkers.
That's what's great about it, though.
Like, I'm not going to kill you. I'm going to make your son kill you with your parents.
Even like the cannibal friend guy. That's an odd way to refer to somebody. But, he's like, oh, he won't stop. He'll go after her family and he'll do this. And like the way that our supposed protagonist takes that and uses it against him. Like, that's a deep level of hatred, man.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, because you usually at this point of the movie, you usually have the protagonist reach a line that he's not willing to cross because he's our protagonist and we're supposed to sympathize. And there is no line that our protagonist would not cross. He's just as willing to be like, I suppose he didn't go hunt down and kill the family himself. So there is some degree of a line there, but like functionally, like this man's like hands were dirty going in and they just got dirtier and he seemed to be just fine with it. Well, not just fine with it, but he ruined himself certainly in the process.
Yeah, it's interesting you said that we usually cheer for whoever. And I found myself at a point where this was basically Godzilla versus Kong for me. Like, I just wanted to see them fuck each other up. I don't care who wins anymore. I don't care what's destroyed. I just want to see some crazy shit. And they delivered.
Yeah. I mean, there's something that's, again, it comes back to kind of like very simple, basic storytelling. You have a very capable villain and you have a very capable hero. And you pit them against each other and watch shit explode. And this movie delivers on every level. You're just, it's.
And like I've said before, I'm not a huge action fan normally, right? And my complaint is always blowing shit up to blow shit up. And this movie gave reasons for the action. Like this fucking scene towards the end, when the main guy knocks the door off of his vehicle just so that he can grab the bad guy and like haul him off. This scene makes no logical real life sense, but wow, it's fantastic. And this is the kind of scene I would normally fucking hate.
I was wondering what you were going to think about that one.
This is usually the part where I would text Don and be like, oh my God, that was fucking stupid. Why would they do that? No, not this time. This time they made me invest so heavily in these characters that when this hit, I was like, yeah, that seems like something he would do at this point. Yeah. And then like doing it in such a way that, the bad guy's out there trying to turn himself in so that he's always in control.
Right.
And so you have all these cops around and they can't stop this shit from happening. and wow. Yeah.
Well, one of the things of that scene is, first off, it would be like the amount of like technical precision required to pull that kind of thing off is like is something you wouldn't expect. It is like a Liam Neeson and Taken kind of thing, but this movie isn't a vessel for just like watch how badass this guy is. It's got so much more going on than that. But at the same time, by the time it happens, you've seen so much, you don't doubt that this guy is capable of doing it. It's almost like a Fast and the Furious moment, but that kind of like crazy car driving action moment, but it's way more visceral and real. And
it made more sense than anything in the Fast and the Furious world.
And there's this what am I going for here? Well, when it looks like this guy's about to get away with it completely, and you might genuinely think at this point in the movie the runtime is running down, like maybe this is the end. Like there's no way to stop this guy from turning himself in. He's done everything he needed to do to break the leash and then protect himself from our hero of the story. But what does the hero do? He does this truly ingenious on one level. I mean, he just the way he just breaks the car door off, like he's like, this is just in my pocket. I've had this in my back pocket for however long. And it's almost its own kind of okay, so I'm gonna go way off on a pivot here, but
sure.
In the movie, Misery by Stephen King, how Paul Sheldon has that whole engages in this idea of like what makes characters interesting in a story and what makes like a situation that they have, like how would they get out, like what if, like how does a character break out of a particular predicament, and the goal is to make it believable for that character, but also to make the predicament so utterly hard that the viewer can't themselves imagine how, or the reader can't themselves imagine how the character is going to do this, so that when the character pulls that out of their bag and whatever it may be, the viewer is like sitting back in their seat with like shock and pleasure, because they're like, whoa, how did they do that? It's satisfying. It's within the realm of possibility. And what this movie managed to do with its absolutely insane 2 hour and 20-minute runtime is, like James said, in another movie that's stupid and you're like rolling your eyes. In this movie, it's just like the perfect thing. It's just the crown on just how far this guy is willing to go, how brutally ingenious he is, and how capable he is, but still under the umbrella of how meaningless this whole thing is and how avoidable this whole thing is. It's a problem he let get out of control. It's like
I do love that
so
people
satisfying.
Call him on that. Like a lot of movies, he would never be told, "Hey, you caused a lot of this," but he's told that, and I really appreciated that.
Yeah, because even to go back to another, I guess, a similar movie like Taken, there's the warning of like, hey, you need to leave, you need to get out of here and stop this, as opposed to what you're doing is definitely making things worse, not just for your situation, but there are other people that are getting involved, other people that are getting killed. Because even when it came down to, and you mentioned this earlier, James, this whole idea of him waiting, he's got to come to some type of understanding that by letting this guy live, more people are going to get hurt. I mean, and there's only those couple of conversations that he has with, his chief and, the father of his former fiance, where they actually do address this. And even then, it doesn't seem as though it's a concern for him. It's kind of like, I got to get this shit done. Like, I have to do this.
Yeah, definitely.
I mean, on a structural level, again, just basic storytelling, we have every character in this movie is active as they can possibly be. There are no passive characters. There's nobody waiting for something to happen to them. They're all driving at 100 miles an hour towards this, towards a cliff. Like, it just makes for something that's so viscerally exciting. Like, everybody is just creating problem after problem and then trying to get out of those problems and creating more problems. And it's good storytelling at the end of the day.
Yeah. Don, what do you have that we haven't hit yet?
Well, I've got a few things, but you know what? This would be my question. I mean, is retribution or revenge, is that something that is ever appropriate? And is it something, as gets explored in this film, is it something that is going to eventually get you to a point of solace? I mean, I know we don't necessarily see that with this film, but it raised that question for me when I was watching it. Was, there's that old adage of, if you go seeking revenge, first dig 2 graves. Obviously, he needs to dig a lot more than 2 graves for this film.
Yeah.
But I mean, it can basically, I guess the breakdown of the question is can there ever be a purposeful revenge?
I mean, I think I've answered this on a different one, but I always come back to, I feel like you're never going to be satisfied. Like, if you provide revenge and you give yourself that, I think that you still have this hole. And so then it becomes like an alcohol tolerance, right? Like, now I need more. And so I don't think that you can ever truly get revenge, but that's my personal belief. So I'm willing to Daniel fighting the opposite if he wants.
So you're saying that it's kind of like Dexter.
Yeah.
Where, that you're never satiated no matter how much you do it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I think this movie is on some level arguing against it's not preachy. That's the thing, because usually, like, a lot of times when movies get into this theme, it's sort of like wagging its finger at somebody or another. And this movie seems to kind of say it's justified on some level, or at least understandable on some level, but at the same time meaningless. Like, it almost feels like Shakespearean in a sense. Like, it could not have happened any other way because of the 2 people that were involved. Like, it's almost like it would have, the dice would have rolled this exact number every time, because these are who these people are. Because this movie, it's about more than just, the revenge. It's also very much about, like, this hero of ours is very clearly a certain kind of person, and I don't think he would have been able, like, I don't get the feeling at the end of this movie like he would have done it differently, even at the very end. Like, he's broken down, he's crying in the road, he's tottering, like the earbuds are coming out. He knows it was all, like, he knows all this is awful, but I don't get the feeling like he would go back and do it differently if he could.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
It seems very fateful in a way, where you have a character who's like it's like almost like there's almost like a tragic element to his character, not just to the circumstances of what happens, but like he's not the kind of guy who was not going to be able to respond in this way. He knew it was the wrong way to respond from the beginning, and yet this is what he was going to do.
Yeah, it's a very deeply cut tragic flaw.
Yeah, exactly.
And he's well aware of it, which makes it more interesting to me.
And I think
go ahead.
Just to kind of roll back, you talked about the woman in the freezer or in whatever, and his lack of surprise there for me kind of says that he was sort of aware of all possible eventualities to some extent going in. Like this wasn't like a story where he learns more about the world or more about evil as he goes. It's like he knows the depth of it from the beginning and he wades right to the bottom because that's all he can do.
Okay.
Like,
Yeah, they could easily rename this movie I've Seen Some Shit.
yeah.
So, no, but what you say makes perfect sense. And when I said that earlier, like I meant more that's what I was expecting. What we got fits the characters really well. It's just not what I thought would happen.
Yeah, no, and again, like I'm not criticizing your
criticize away. It was stupid. Way to go.
No,
just kidding.
no.
I'm kidding.
Like that's a great way to explore the character and the decisions. It's just, I mean, it's not what happens in this movie, and I think that like that would work perfectly in a movie, but in this movie, it's almost like, of course she's here. Of course there's another victim. Like he had no, like he had no there's no surprising element to him. There's nothing that could really like, yeah, it gets away from him at the end and he's kind of like, he's desperate and obviously he didn't intend for that to happen, but there's no like moment where he gets closer to his wife again and feels like that, like this is not what she would have wanted from me kind of thing.
Okay.
It's just like, yes, of course there's another woman just like my wife in a position very similar to the one that she was in, and he doesn't blink. Why would he? He knew that from the beginning.
Yep.
Like, it's like you said, tragic flaw almost. Like he's.
Yeah, I want to mention one thing that I found really funny just because it's in this scene. Well, it's right before this scene. It's when Cannibal Friend goes to find something to eat. This was just so hilariously written to me. And I know it's not meant to be funny, but when he's like, oh man, I already ate the guts. Yeah, oh, well, I guess. And then he opens to get the live woman, like there was something about that was so hilarious to me. Like it just, I don't know. It was just fantastic.
No, I feel you, man. I mean,
so real.
It's so they make the horror for these like the evil for these characters is so utterly mundane and just written into the fabric of their lives. And it's like, I guess I got to go butcher the other like lady cowering in the back of this cage because, man, I'm really craving intestines tonight.
I really wanted a quick snack, but now I got to kill this lady and then clean up a little bit.
Oh, it's so inconvenient.
I would like to know more about the woman that's with him as well, because she doesn't seem like she's scared. Like she doesn't seem like she's being held against her will, but she also like just keeps rolling her eyes and she's like annoyed with everybody. I would love to know more about this character.
Look, these were uninvited guests over for dinner. I mean, you think about it, she had to prepare something extra.
Yeah, that's hard. It's hard being a host.
You probably ate all the guts, and that's why we had to do this. Jeez.
There might even be some subtle like sister vibes there or something like that. Like she's like just one in the family.
Can imagine the stuff that she's probably seen and just kind of
right. I've seen some shit.
Yeah.
All right. We mentioned this a little bit, but with talking about the way in which the main killer gets tortured and stuff, that then starts creating other opportunities. And what I found interesting is that scene where he goes, which completely, I love the irony of this moment, where the doctor at the clinic is basically telling him like, oh, be careful, son. Just next time you're out there playing soccer, just be careful you don't break your wrist. And, I'm sure this doctor's seen and heard all types of excuses, but the fact that this guy who's been been beaten up, had his wrist shattered by being stomped on, and his whole thing is, I'm not your son. Don't call me, old people just, are so disrespectful. And so he goes on this whole tirade, and then there's almost this moment, but as a viewer, you're already cautious about what's going to happen. But the young lady, the young nurse comes in, interrupts what's going on, and he then proceeds to hit on her outside, like, oh, you're very pretty. In a normal movie, this would kind of be the whole "this is how they met" type story. But you're sitting there thinking like he's going to do something. He leaves and you're thinking, okay, well, this is another moment where somebody got away. And then you realize he found his way into the building or back into the building, into this back room, and feels as though it's his obligation to teach her about sex. Because even in that whole speech, he's like, oh, you don't have a boyfriend? I guess that means you don't know how. And of course, her response is like, how, like, what do you mean? Do what?
Yeah.
And, he's like, oh, don't play silly, but you know what I'm talking about. But he sees it as his duty and his obligation to teach her about sexual exploration, which that whole scene, and I realized this when I was writing it down, that whole scene isn't necessarily cringeworthy. It's nail biting. It's horrific in itself, where there's nothing gory, there's nothing bloody that happens to her. It's the violation and the implied violation that you hear. You don't see it, but it immediately makes you think like, I've seen him kill people. I've seen him chop people up.
Yeah.
This is the worst thing I've seen on this film. And then again, you start to excuse it, like, I hope he gets the shit kicked out of him again. Oh, I can't wait for it. And of course, then, he gets interrupted, and the hero, the quote unquote hero of the film, comes in and does the wonderful thing of cutting his Achilles.
Yeah, just like, this is what I'm going to do to him next time. Like, he just has a list. Like, first I'm going to break his wrist, and then maybe, spread out the love. Let's take one of his legs a little. But not so much that he can't kind of run. Just, but yeah,
I'd love to see his checklist.
That is the hardest scene to watch in the movie for me, in my opinion. On a rewatch, that is bar none the hardest scene to watch in the movie. Just it's such a violation, and it's almost like for one, it's like he's like desperate to regain some sense of normality and power, like, for himself, since he just was made so powerless a little while ago. So it's like he needs to go victimize somebody to feel on top again. But then on the other hand, I think there's an interesting pairing there where he was, as you mentioned, and I had forgotten because there's a brief little line of dialogue in the movie, but he had discussed, he seemed to take such umbrage with being patronized, and then he goes around and he immediately patronizes this young woman, and obviously in a much worse way. But I think it's like a power dynamic again there. He resented being put on the side of on the submissive side, or not submissive, but it's what I'm looking for. When you're with an
just
elder.
Not the powerful. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. You call me a son. You're talking down to me. He was already made to feel powerless. Therefore, he took special offense to this guy even speaking to him in a paternal kind of way.
Right.
Yeah, it's very, very much about don't question my manhood. I'm on this level, and you can't talk down to me. You have to show me respect. And so, he does. He goes out and he immediately tries to regain power.
Well, yeah, it's this moment of he's almost trying to reassert his masculinity by whatever ridiculous method he thinks is normal or okay in his mind.
Yeah, it's the mundanity of his not for those who are experiencing it, but for him it's just like it's Tuesday,
Right.
Which is awful, and kind of what this movie sort of makes you look at head on so much. Is like for these people, this is all so remarkably not special to any of them.
Right.
And the extra fascinating part about that is it doesn't seem even particularly special to our hero either. It all seems kind of like right there. He's seen it all before to some extent.
Yeah, I was thinking about that with a couple of the kills. Like, he picks up the one woman and just almost immediately bashes her fucking head in the passenger seat. And he just does it in such a, like you said, this is Tuesday kind of way, and I don't know, little things like that were so good at the characterization levels of where these guys are, because we watch it and we're like, holy shit. And yet, like, that's a totally normal thing for him. That's not even going very far with this person.
And there's also, the form of the movie itself falls right in line with that too, because, an American movie, for instance, would most likely cut away as the hammer falls or something to kind of like implicitly acknowledge how awful the act is. But this movie is just like, no, it's normal. Just watch. Like, it's unflinching. Just never glances away, never cuts away.
We better know American remake of this.
Oh my God. If they did, I would just watch this again.
Don't say that, because somebody will probably make it now. Like, that movie.
It's ruining my adulthood. Anyway. Sorry.
I was gonna say, I don't know if it works like that, James.
I couldn't resist. No, but they remade Old Boy, and I've never forgiven anybody who was involved. So I fear them trying to remake this.
Aren't they remaking? Oh, they're remaking Train to Busan.
Yes, on the bullet trains that we have here in America. Yes.
Oh yeah, naturally. it'll
Amtrak
just
to Chicago.
But yeah, they just I don't understand why people can't just enjoy the originals. And
well, if there's one thing,
I get the money issue, but
if we get a little moment here of hopefulness towards the presence of Eastern cinema being accepted by Americans and the like, Squid Game. I mean, maybe they can cancel that Train to Busan remake now and just put put Train to Busan back on Netflix and say, hey, if you like Squid Game, watch this.
I think that's a fantastic idea.
Because that was the most popular Netflix show of all time, from what I recently read.
Oh yeah, it
subtitles
broke a lot of records.
Oh, did it hit number 1 now?
Yeah, ever. Nice. I think subtitles and everything.
So, that I'm glad you brought up Squid Game, because I was looking at how much this movie costs, and in 2010, with its release in 2010, I think the budget was $6 million. And looking at this film, I was like, there's no way they made this off of $6 million. But then I remember reading or watching something about Squid Game, and one of the reasons why it was shot where it was, instead of taking the script and possibly making a US version or filming it here or whatever. And Netflix and other production companies are looking into doing this. And not to mention the popularity of Korean, not just Korean cinema, but K-pop and all the other stuff, that because of the labor laws that you have in Korea regarding film, you have lower rates, you can work longer hours, and you end up producing a film for a lot cheaper than you would if it were done in the United States or Europe or in a good number of other countries. Because I think Squid Game's budget, I think, was like $12 million. And in Netflix's, I guess, however they calculate the viewer worth or whatever it was like $500 million. It was something ridiculous as far as the worth of Squid Game when they tallied up, the amount of views that it had. And again, it just showed that there was a lot of money to be made, but they definitely took advantage of the film laws and labor laws in Korea in order to make a cheap product, or at least, make a film for a low amount of money to have a huge benefit from that. Even if it didn't come in box office sales or per view streaming sales, which again, when I looked at this movie, I'm like, $6 million. You would not have made this movie a 2.5 hour movie like this, the quality of it, for $6 million in the United States. Even in 2010, it wasn't going to happen.
No way. Like a $50 million movie.
Oh, at least.
You guys have mentioned the runtime a couple times, and I got to tell you, when I started this, I was like, 2.5 hours, fuck. And I never felt it. It was one of those films that I was like, it's over? What? Like, there were a couple little tiny scenes where I was like, okay, how far are we? I'd come out of it a little bit, but for the most part, I've had 90-minute movies that felt way longer than this to me.
It's blisteringly paced.
It's just gorgeous. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that was my first reaction as well, James. When I went and looked at it, I was like, oh, man, I don't know if I'm going to make it on this one. Because I actually put off watching it in the evening, and I was like, well, I'll watch it around around noon, so I can actually I don't have to worry about missing anything or getting to the point where I'm like, oh man, I'm too tired to finish this movie. So I mean, it blew by. Did not feel like a normal 2.5 hour movie. The only time I questioned the amount of time was after that first act, when our hero tracks down the villain, and I'm thinking like, well, what the fuck else is left?
Yeah.
Like he's caught. It's like, oh, are we going to do like a bunch of flashbacks to this guy when he was a monster? Now he's going to start investigating all this guy's previous crimes and finding other victims. And then when it was clear that, oh, he's going to do catch and release, he's going to fuck with this guy. I'm like, all right, well, what's going to be the next thing? But yeah, it's for anybody who gets turned off by amount of time or even subtitles for that matter. I still don't get it with the subtitles, but anybody who's normally going to be put off by those two things, it's not going to affect you at all. Like this is very well done. It's well paced. And it's, I mean, if you like action, you like horror, you like some gore. I mean, there were a couple of times where I found myself turning away from the screen.
Oh God. Yeah.
Nice.
But even then that's
unusual.
Well, no, there's some certain things on film like fuck with me. The Achilles always gets like when Chucky does it. I think in Child's Play 2 when he slices the Achilles, that gets me every time. It doesn't even matter the practical effects as far as the aging of them gets me every time. Anytime you do that, I think it was done in one of the Nightmare on Elm Street films where Freddy like pulls the tendons out and he's walking the guy like a puppet. Like that part gets to me because it's just something about the back heel, the Achilles heel that just that tendon.
Oh, I'm right there with you. And I will say for this movie, I mean, I've seen I'm no stranger to awful things on film. This movie, every time I watch it, I always think I remember how violent it is going in. Mm-hmm. And it always surprises me with just how violent it is.
Oh yeah.
Like no matter how many times I watch it, it's always more violent than I expect. Even though I go in with that thought, still.
But even like pounding the woman's head in with like a pipe, like it's like the first couple hits, I'm like, all right. And then like it just keeps going. And then it like somehow reaches a point where I'm like, okay, that's a lot of pipe hits, like not that I'm actually having this exact conversation in my head, but you know what I mean? Like there's something about it where it hits a line that goes into where it's not too much. Like I don't want to quit watching, but it gets really uncomfortable. It's not so drawn out that it becomes lame either.
It's sustained in a way, but at the same time, I wouldn't ever even consider calling this movie gratuitous or exploitative. It really feels like it's exactly what it needs to be to do what it does. It just, and I mean, that's awful. Like, but it's just very honest in its own horrible way.
Yeah. And I think something gets lost when you do sanitize films that way. Not that you have to be gratuitous with violence, which, again, this one, I guess it helps to drive home the fact that this guy is, like, unredeemable by showing how brutal this guy is, even to the point where, that one line that he has with the second girl that we see him pick up, when they stop, he says, oh, you're looking at me like you stepped in dog shit. Yeah. And just the whole idea that she knows something bad is going to happen. He knows that she now knows this and even says like, oh, it's just a pipe. You've never seen a pipe before. And then, within half a second, he's beating her over the head with it. But yeah, I think it helps, at least for an audience member to help drive that home, that this guy is a hunter who is now being hunted.
Mm-hmm.
And there's, you want to see him caught, as opposed to, some villains or some evil characters, criminals, whatever, where we don't get to see that much of who they are day to day doing their stuff, right?
Yeah.
We might see them not being a monster, and then you kind of like, oh, this guy is normal, just like everybody else. And I'm glad they never went that route with this guy of showing him like being a good dad, or not being that creepy bus driver that waits until there's one girl left in the car and then proceeds to take her out and rape her and then with the plans to kill her. So I'm glad that they didn't give us that part of this guy to where we can look at him and say like, oh, he's a sympathetic character. We see him as a monster from the beginning to his end.
It's amazing that it's one of the most violent movies, maybe the most violent movie in some ways that I've ever seen. And I've seen so many, and yet I cannot pin the word gratuitous on it. I just can't.
No.
It's just, you couldn't tell this story any other way and have it be the same story.
No. Because again, you'd be missing out on a few things.
Yeah.
Whether that's the rage from our hero, or just the monstrosity of the villain.
Yeah, like it's really kind of an intimate exploration of predation, I guess.
Yes.
And yeah. And here I am. I'm like, I already did we've already done the chat, and I'm like, well, now I have to watch it again.
We have that effect on people.
Yeah. Hell yeah.
In case people like this movie, which I shouldn't even say in case, because they should like this movie. Not that I want to bully anybody into it. But if they like this movie, what are some films that you think that would go well with this movie, Daniel?
Well, I'm going to go ahead and say I can't think of any movie that is like this movie. So just watch this movie twice.
I love it. Hell yeah.
It's one of a kind.
So I'm gonna do my double feature thing here, and I think this would pair great with Old Boy, not just because of the actor that's in both, but there's a lot of similar themes. Old Boy is definitely not on quite this level of absolute destruction, but it's got some interesting things to say, and I think that it would pair really well with this. If you're gonna go. If you say, oh, I don't want to read for 2 movies, then maybe I'd throw in something like Last House on the Left and call it a day. But I would definitely say Old Boy is my number one choice here.
Okay.
It's a good call.
All right. Let me go through all 900 of my movies this time.
Yes.
Well, I already mentioned several of these. Taken, The Hitcher, Last House on the Left. But some other ones I would add to this, Hostel, Silence of the Lambs, Seven, Insomnia, The Little Things, and I think that was the name of it. It's the Denzel Washington, Rami Malek movie. I Spit on Your Grave, Zodiac, and these last 2 are going to make James very happy. Home Alone and Becky.
Yes, Becky. How did I forget Becky?
Becky was solid.
I want to change mine, and no, I'm sticking with Old Boy, but Becky's my other one instead of Last House.
Yeah,
God, that'd be great with this.
I might even go as far as to say, I mean, like, you're veering a little bit away from horror to some extent, but the Raid 1 and 2. Have either of you seen those?
I remember the first one. I don't think I saw the second one.
Yeah, so the second
one, nonstop.
Yeah, and the second one is basically the plot line of Departed, or what's the movie? And The Departed was ripped off of an Eastern film to begin with. I forget the name of it, Inside Affairs or something like that. But I mean, I love The Departed, but it borrowed heavily from that plot line. Anyway, The Raid 2 is a martial arts movie, but wrapped into this, weird story of like moles and rats and criminal underworld business. And it has I don't know, like those movies come as close as I can think in terms of like capturing the energy of a movie like this, although they aren't horror, just the viscerality of it all. But yeah,
everything's horror if you look at it the right way.
Mm-hmm. As it should be.
Through that.
If you were Marv, Home Alone is a horror movie, dude.
Oh yeah.
Poor Marv. But
or the mom. you gotta give her due as well. It's definitely a horror movie for her because she's flown several thousand miles away, and apparently they forgot their own kid. So
yeah, no, that's kind of the definition of despair for a parent.
yeah, and here's I think Cynthia Pelayo, when she was on the show, I can't remember if it was before we recorded or while we were recording, but she mentioned this very horrible thing that I now think from now on, which is when, as a mother, for those 9 months that a child is, that you're carrying that child, that's the only time you're 100% sure, 100% certain you know where your child is. And when she said that, that immediately made me think, like, fuck, I worry about my kid from now on based off of that.
No kidding.
Which, I mean, and I think this was before. No, I take it back. We were actually in pandemic at that time. So
yeah,
but my kid was homeschooled at the time. So now it's one of those things of, hey, she's at school, and now there are all these different things I worry about. And then I have this movie to think about what I would do if someone did something to my child.
Yep.
Which, by the way, James, I don't know if I've shared this on the show before, but my mother has basically stated this. If something ever happens to her grandchild, her granddaughter, for me not to do anything about it, to let her do it. And I'm like, what the fuck are you talking about, Mom? She says, well, I've lived a good life. I can live the rest of my life in jail. There's no need for you to go to jail. And I'm like, is my mom a gangster? What is going on here?
Sounds like it to me.
Just basically saying she'll take the fall. I'm like, okay.
I'll be honest, that would make a lot of your family stories make a ton of sense. So,
yeah.
All right, man. Let's bring this back to you, and you can tell our listeners where they can find you online or order your books or anything else you want to tell them.
Yeah, Jews. So you can find me on Twitter. It's where I'm most active on social media, at DBH Fiction. You also see me kind of trolling around BookTube, doing interviews and chats and whatnot if you want to see what I look like for some reason. And then my books, a lot of them are all on Amazon. Poor Things, The Safe, Long Grieve, My Hungry Friend, and The Nightmareland Chronicles, of which 5 books are out and the 6th is coming shortly.
Awesome. So thank you once again for coming on the show, man. It was fantastic. And feel free to swing by anytime you want to chat with us.
Oh, yeah. Anytime you want me on, I'm happy to be here. This was a whole lot of fun, and I appreciate you having me on, both of you.
Always welcome back.
All right. So until next time, as always, I'm James Sabata.
And I'm Don Guillory.
And we will see you next week here at thenecronama.com.